Ciao, 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 ciao. Finally got done watching the 4 hour deposition by the subcommittee of Hillary Rodham Clinton. And so much to unpack. This was actually more electrifying than the deposition we reviewed in the last video. Uh, for better or worse, possibly. Let's get into it. All right, you white motherfuckers, all eyes on me. This is the I Refuse podcast. I'm Mr. Fox, the I Refuse podcast. I'm back, just as I promised, with a review of the subcommittee, by the subcommittee of Hillary Clinton in response to the Epstein files. Now, keep in mind before I get into anything, this is not going to be one of those political show type of things. This is me, a citizen, a taxpayer, a historical buff, maturing and realizing some things as a full-grown adult as we examine and explore things that have happened in the past. Things that when I was a youth, about involving people that have been getting on a lot of people's nerves, by which I've been entertained by. When it comes to the Clintons, and this is coming from somebody that has been an adult almost years, they just can't take these two people. Two people that have been married almost a little over 50 years, two lawyers. They know the Constitution in and out. They know the law. They know the difference between being professional within the rights of the law, and they know on the other side of that how people get down in politics. Two totally different things. In Hillary Clinton's case, she more or less is in a very sticky situation and has been even more so the last 10 or so years. In addition to being the former First Lady, she has also been the former Secretary of State, has held a seat in the New York Congressional District. She has not been liked almost as long as I've been alive. You know, you have women out here that feel like she should have left Bill. That ain't gonna happen. You have people out here that, you know, from her history of having ran against 47 almost 10 years ago, they're going to constantly ride for him against her. And there is definitely a lack of trust on both sides. For whatever reason, the energy is of a greater level in their direction by folks on the other side. You add to that the climate, the last 10 or so years. Oh, it's on damn near unreasonable, visceral levels towards this lady. In the 4.5 hours of the deposition, there were definitely moments of that. And you can tell, without having seen the face of the person asking the questions, just by the tone in which they asked the questions, just by the way they framed a question if there was an actual question. Fluffing, the time to ask a question with clearly personal biased opinions against her for, this other man. Mind you, this is within the context and the framework of the files. But throughout the 4.5 hours, most of that was definitely time for a performance piece, for the person asking the question. There were a few people like this, to take the time to show their sucking abilities while on the knees for, the man that she ran against. And showing their position as it pertains to, being married to a woman, being a man, their expectations within the confines of marriage, just all kinds of nuttiness, in the views of being traditional and all that other stuff. So you have, through the 4.5 hours, a woman that is facing misogyny like none other. Stone age views and ideas, very archaic, very male-centered, by not only men but also other women during these 4.5 hours, sitting across from her. Sitting across from her, a woman, Hilary is a lawyer. She knows the law in and out, as does Bill Clinton. They know the position. They hold such a position in high regard, and they are sitting across from folks that are not as well versed in the law. They definitely do not present themselves as, by the way they frame their questions, if there was one, in a way that they're definitely biased, and claiming, to be for the people. I'm just fleshing this out as we're going into this, and it's been a very interesting 4.5 hours. Keep in mind that the two depositions, the topic and the theme at hand was supposed to be regarding the Epstein files. When it was Hillary's turn, her deposition occurred the day before Bill Clinton's. Most of the questioning, if it wasn't about 47, it was about her husband. Anybody that knows if this was a court of law or even if it wasn't, speculation. You're asking me, a person at this point that's been made aware in this deposition, that the golden goose, who is the man that killed himself in his jail cell years ago, has probably been to the White House over 10 times, may have come to events that I may or may not have been in the same room. Things that are not related have not come out in the files, by which most of the stuff in those things are redacted. So you have like black squares over people. You have pictures that are cut down to a specific frame, so you don't know where these places are or what the context is. So you have all of that brought up, and you're asking a third party about this man, and you're trying to fish based off of the perception that because he has pictures with her husband, that they are somehow connected, and because is perceived that they're connected, you want them held accountable, or to in that regard, under some assumption that they were aware that things were going by the hands of this man and the hands of the woman he was with, all of that. And time after time throughout the 4.5 hours, there was attempts, even if the framing of the questions or whatever you want to call them failed to arrive to that. By which her answers, for the most part, is I don't recall, I don't recollect, no, for the most part. Those are most of her answers. Of course, either member of her legal team that was with her objected, speculation, to which most of that is speculation. So it was very clear to me that the first third of the deposition, that this is what she continues to deal with. To my knowledge, she's not mentioned a little bit, if at all, in any of these files, but that doesn't stop them from asking or trying to arrive. And you got to keep in mind, they're both being asked in 2026 about an association they had with this man 25, 30 some odd years ago, prior to everybody's knowledge that this man was into the trafficking, the assaults, and the dealings with underage females. I wasn't even there, and I was rolling my eyes at the video. I was like, what? And they definitely, there were definitely some provocative moments by some of the folks asking the questions, crossing the lines into, under the guise of, you claim to be for victims, and from your previous, one of your previous posts, because I got to give it to Hilary Clinton. What she did at the very top of the deposition, before any questions were asked, and Bill Clinton didn't do this, is she read off a pre-written statement that she wrote, and which lasted about 10 or 15 minutes. Now, at the time, I was like, okay, get ahead of this, control the narrative, and set the groundwork. I don't think she knew going in that by doing that, she opened the gate for people to cherry pick certain words out of her almost 10 or 15 minute statement to frame their questions and try to basically entrap her, or try to confuse her or gaslight her into being a contradiction. So with that, there were definitely moments, and I knew it was either Bobert or Mace that was coming from. There were There was a guy out of South Carolina, and then there was another guy who was former military who were on similar frequencies and trying to undermine what she had stated earlier in the deposition. And at the same time, or sometimes in the same breath, place themselves on a higher plane because they were former military, and if the way I perceive you going about this in your marriage is how I would never go about this in my marriage. If, for example, they're asking, like I said earlier, they're asking her about her husband and the magnitude and the depth of his relationship or association with Epstein since he's in the photos. He has been on the plane, they say allegedly somewhere between 15 and 20 times, taking flights to different countries. And even going as far as assuming she's been to the island and they go through the list of different residences he's had. And even if she's answered those kind of questions already in the deposition earlier, they still try to frame it differently. The same type of question. So it got across, the questions went across family lines. How did your daughter feel when all the stuff came out? Do you feel a responsibility as a proponent for women from your post and all this other? It was just like, wow. Hillary Clinton better than me. It's one thing, like she definitely, she showed up, right? And she is definitely not one of these new jacks. Not one of these new jacks. She is very alert and very aware as to how folks try to get down and what they try to arrive to with her. That intuition's always clicking. Throughout the 4.5 hours of her deposition, with regard to her marriage to Bill, of course, they tried to marry some of what she's outlined early in the deposition to, you claimed, the victims and, you feel for the victims and stuff. They went back off of the strength of that to the 90s. The code of your husband when he was president, and, his dealings with Paula Jones and Monica Lewinsky. I was just like, some of y'all weren't even alive. And this is the kind of thing that she knows going in. I mean, it's politics. It's definitely a dirty game. They're trying to, when it goes from what should have been about Epstein into trying to poke at her heart and her marriage and her family and her daughter, to obviously try to get to some kind of moment of gratification, like some kind of gotcha. And I'm like, oh, I was sitting there like, I would have swung, but I don't have a Juris Doctorate. And this is a trip. This is a real trip. Keep in mind that, there was definitely some kind of investigation. They had a lot of time, a lot of preparatory time to frame and ask better questions. Um, but it just fell flat because you're asking a person that was on a plane that is not even in the emails. Your exhibits are redacted. The exhibits are don't have at the very least minimum levels of specificity. Like, where do you think this was going? If, assuming this was, the goal was to find her and her husband liable and have, give the people and the public uh, a display of accountability. I, it, I just, there were moments I was watching and I was looking at the scene like, are y'all for real? And watching this deposition and watching Bill Clinton's deposition reaffirms my position. And I'm saying this to the audience. Those of you out there that are people pleasers, those of you out there that may not be aware of how power hungry people are around you until after the fact. Opinions, and this is not only at a social level, but at the workplace too. I get that you want to get somewhere in life, right? And I get very much that you feel comfortable and you feel accomplished in the power of networking and knowing people and being associated with people. Um, but times are funny out here, and people are very funny out here. So when you find yourself in a position of controversy that they want to drum up, and I'm speaking from experience, that they want to drum up to arrive to some conclusion about you, clearly out of bias and insecurity, um, whether it's been a long-standing thing and they're just now getting to you about it in front of folks. Understand this. Everybody's got an opinion. People's opinions are a reflection of their expectations that they themselves most likely will never meet. And they look to you to figure it out. And it's like, no. So I say that to say this. Looking at both depositions, um, you know, for the most part, Hillary Clinton's deposition was more electric, because Hillary Clinton is more in tune. She can smell bullshit from far away. Bill Clinton, on the other hand, lovable, charming guy. Over the years, and I'm saying of yesteryear, of that time, 30 some years ago, definitely gives a lot of folks a lot of material and leeway to work with, because the downside to living in the public eye is that whether you're not even the president, you could be an executive or something. But in the world of politics and all of that, man, that probably my first introduction into the public opinion matters more than court. If you let it. If you let it. If you let it. And here it is 2026 and they continue to try it. For the public and the American people chip away and try to undermine this lady because they don't like her. But she's not letting them get to her. You gotta remember, most of the folks that came in to question her in her deposition, not a law degree. Boebert Mace, probably not a law degree. And there was one guy in there who definitely took most of his running time to either frame it around himself, his marriage, his views on marriage, male-female relationships, and of course, the power of the peen on 47. And the tone, like from the onset, he didn't even get through the first question before it was clearly obvious that he was livid about something. She never got a chance to even get all the question from this guy before he went into this whole thing into this whole thing about him and stuff. So when it was his turn, it was about Bill being in the photos, and they're working off of these emails and these redacted photos from almost 25 some years ago. If it was, what are your feelings and yada yada yada, if it was my wife and she was in a similar position with a man or a person that has committed these crimes, it's come out later after the fact, I would find it most curious. But mind you, he had framed it in a past tense, like before, because this is what they're working with. Before anybody knew, anybody was aware, this is when Clinton and Epstein were on the flights, were in photos together. This is before they cut off any association with him, long before any inkling of an investigation was brought to anybody's awareness, long before he got convicted, long before the suicide in the cell, all that stuff. Mind you, the objective and the goal is to bridge her and him to Epstein. Yes, he may have made a donation over here, as does a lot of people. However, I would think, and this is just me talking, like I have been the last 29 some odd minutes, if having gone to the school of the first 48, having gone to the school of unsolved mysteries, having gone to the school of cops back in the day, if the goal was to make a connection, to tie these two people over here with this man over here that's been gone for almost 10 years, I would think I could do better than a donation he made, a wedding ceremony that Ghislaine went to as the date of a totally different man that they knew back in the day. I would try to look for something, some paper trail, money or otherwise, that went from them to this man. And gotta give it to Hilary. You know, she's not one to just sit there and just let the shit go on for too long. There were definitely moments throughout where she tried to direct everybody's attention on the record to the very person that should be in there. But I think we all know that that's never going to happen while, you know, he's still where he is. Because, I definitely believe he got in there to avoid any accountability, and they're going to protect him because A, he's a member of their party, and B, he's in one of the most powerful positions of the world. But we've said on the podcast, and you shall get into the I Refuse podcast wherever you get your podcasts, or Usual Suspects podcast wherever you get your podcasts, can tell that he is the front man while the people behind him are the ones actually doing the legwork, making moves, doing certain things, because it's just too convenient, and there's no coincidence of a lot of things happening or about to happen. But that will probably never happen. There will probably never be a deposition of that man. Definitely not while he's up there so high. But going back to an earlier point, I can't believe in 2026 that women still have to be faced with what I saw in that deposition. When hateration and hatred no longer works for folks, they tell lies. Or they try to manipulate, gaslight, undermine, while ensuring that they look good, that it's all for the best. So that's what we're working with. They could not, they failed to land the plane. They're circling around, fishing for a little over 4 hours. Some of them, you can tell they were getting frustrated because you're not getting an answer, let alone an answer you don't like, from a very powerful, intelligent woman you don't like. And B, your questions are over here and all over the place. And people in their moment, and when it was time for them to ask her questions, were taking forever to get to an actual question. It was definitely a very top heavy on opinions of her and what she said in her statement earlier, almost 3 hours ago. Off of third-hand information. It wasn't specific to begin with. Ah, boy. You know, it's when I think of what people get paid to have those positions, you know, I don't think a lot of people take into account the tiresome, the very tiresome productions they have to be faced with. And y'all are sitting across from a lawyer, so you know if there's any demographic or profession that knows about investigation and evidence gathering, it would be her. And I knew from the onset, the way she said her name at the very beginning, for the record, for the first time, she was so over it. And I don't blame her because, yes, I'm here, but really, you couldn't do any better than this. So there it is. I've said what I had to say. This was they definitely tried throughout. Remember, there was a member of the committee that not only did this once, but did this twice. As they're in a session, taking photos of her and posting them on social media and being called out twice. They said it was Bobert, who is clearly a fan. Mace is clearly a fan of Hillary Rodham Clinton, and I don't blame him. You know, it's just so interesting with women that are male centered. In the same vein that they are trying to undermine another woman for female victims, are participating in games of, from the boys club. Just as hostile against women as the men are, just as argumentative against another woman as the men are. Very, very weird. You know, the hatred, the hatred's very weird. The jealousy is a very weird thing to see. And it just falls apart. It's already very obvious that that's what's going on. And I don't know. I don't see how they can pat themselves on the back. But kind of piggybacking off what I said earlier, this is how it is when you have people that are not effective, that are not they are not competent. They are not competent. Ugh. Dog and pony show, a circus. They kept trying to. And there were plenty of times that I was sitting on my couch watching, like, girl, start swinging. I know you can't, it's just not in good form. You are a professional. You've been at this longer than most the people across from you asking questions have been alive. You've been married to Bill longer than they've been alive. And it's just odd, man. It's just a wild time right now. Definitely a distraction. They should have called it a distract position instead of a deposition, but I digress. I'm Mr. Fox, the I Refuse podcast. This was definitely an exercise in restraint, composure to the best of her facilities. Hillary Rodham Clinton is not your average woman. She is not like these other girls that men expect, or other men expect to fall in line and let them lead and do as they say. Be barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen, cooking my food while I do everything outside the house for the only income we have, and fool la la on you while I travel and claim that I'm for the women and for I'm going to a whole intrusive thoughts kind of thing. Another treat you get when you come to the I Refuse podcast, the usual suspects, because this is wild to me. So again, Mr. Fox, the I Refuse podcast, get into it. Follow, subscribe wherever you see us over here. Wherever you get your podcasts, continue to support original Black content creation, such as what I produce here, over there, wherever you get your podcasts. I Refuse Podcast, Usual Suspects Podcast, I Refuse Podcast After Dark if you feel so inclined. We're on Twitter, Tumblr, Blue Sky. We have a WordPress blog. We're on Instagram. Link to all of that is on the YouTube page, and it's also on the social media page, X Blue Sky. And I will catch you guys later. Peace. Fendi, like the bag. This is the I Refuse podcast.